Hey, hi again, and here I am in a brand new folder, so an empty folder. And if you remember, and you should remember when we built a website with Flask, you should remember how a Flask directory is structured. So we had this templates folder where the HTML files will go, and we have a static folder as well, where we put the CSS files or JavaScript files if we have. And then our Python file would go like straight here in this main folder. I said first I'll build the front end, so I'll create the HTML files first without creating any Python file. And you know that we use Atom for web application. So inside the templates folder, I'll create a file, and let's call this index.html. And also a file in static, let's say main.css. So the CSS file and the index.html file. In this lecture, we will build the HTML part, so those input fields that you saw in the previous lectures. When someone visits your website, your URL, and there is a file named index.html in the main directory of your web server, that file will be open as the home page. So just to be clear. Now let's go ahead and build this HTML script. This is the first thing you pass there, always. So the document type, HTML, and then the HTML tags, and the closing tag. So I assume you understand HTML. HTML is very easy. If you've never done that, you can still follow me in this lecture by just typing what I type. But it's good to go through a basic tutorial with HTML. HTML is way easier than Python, so that shouldn't be a problem for you to learn. And normally you pass here the language and English. So, and now everything goes between here. So let's put a title which will show on the browser bar. Yep. And then you have the head of your HTML script. There you can put the links to your CSS files or your JavaScript files. So that's what I'm gonna do now. So you need to use the link tag. And then I can put here the relative path to my CSS file. So that's how my HTML script will know where to look for CSS styling. So we are here in index.html, so we need to go one level up. So 2 dots and 1 slash. This means we go one level up, and then we enter the static folder, and then we access the main.css file. That should do it. You need to declare that you're working with a style sheet. And at the moment we have an empty CSS file, so that will not take any effect for now. Our HTML page will be a plain HTML without colors and anything. And here we are done with the meta part. So now we start writing the part where we'll display the content. And the part that displays the content, it goes inside the body tags. Like that. And now everything goes inside these tags. We now start thinking from up to the bottom of our page. So the first thing we had there was this title that says collecting heights. You can write anything, and we could create that with an h1 tag, so a big font heading. But before I do that, I would like to use a division. So a division is to organize your HTML elements better. And this also allows you for better referencing from your CSS script. So this division will wrap up the entire container, the entire page. I'll put that a name, container. So with that name I'll refer from the CSS class. And then everything goes inside this division. So h1, h1, collecting heights, and maybe another heading there with a smaller font, so h3, So we want to tell the user what to do with those input entries there. So let's say, please fill the entries to get on height. You can tweak this text wherever you like, and also the data that you are expecting from the user. So maybe you don't want to collect heights, but another attribute. So feel free to do that. And yeah, this should be fine now. If I try that, show in Explorer, yeah, index, yeah, seems to be working. So let's go ahead now and add the form with those input entries. And that is implemented using a form tag. So like that. Now this form, this expects the user to enter some data. So you need to perform an action then after the user presses the button of this form. So when the user presses the button of this form, what you want to do is you want to go to this URL, which in this case is just a file that we'll be creating in the templates folder. So here we'll have like a success.html file. Yeah. And basically what we'll have here is, let me copy this just for being quick. And basically this will have not this once, but remove the form closing tag. So we could have here some simple text thanking the user, like thank you for your submission, and maybe a break line there. So we go to the next line. You'll receive an email with the survey results shortly. And yeah, don't forget to close the p tag like that. And if I try this, yeah, so it's a plain text for now, but the CSS will stylize it later, so don't worry. So this page will be open when the user presses that button. So let's go ahead and create that button, but before we create the button, we have to create the input forms. And there's also something important to pass here. So you want to pass the method which is post. So normally you have get methods when you just want you call a file from the server. So when you open a URL, like you open this index.html URL, and you get the HTML elements, so you see the page. This is a GET request, you're just getting. But when you send data through the web servers, like we're doing in this case, we are sending the email and the height. So this is a post request, and you want to specify that here explicitly. Now, to create those two input forms that we have there, you need to use input tags like that, and you don't have to write an opening tag and a closing tag. You can just go ahead and write everything here, so the attributes of the input tag in here inside these brackets. So that will have a title, and the title is shown when the user holds the cursor in the input for a while, and you want to say something like maybe your email will be safe with us. And then you have something called a placeholder, and that is the default text that the input shows. So let's say enter your email address, and then you have another attribute called type, and that should be email in our case. So type is important because if you could put text here, but if you put email, your input will be able to validate the email address of your user. So it will say if the user has not entered a format that doesn't look like an email, he'll get some pop-up saying that you have to put something that looks like an email. And then you have name, and this is, we can put anything here, email name, let's say, and this will be used by Python to pull off the email address that the user enters in the input. So with Python you'll say something like give me the value of the input where name is email name is equal to this string. Yeah, basically that's it, and you need to put this to make this a required field, so the user cannot press submit if he hasn't entered this data, and this remains like that. So yeah, basically that's it. If you want a break line so that in the next line you write the next input form, and I'll copy this one here and put it there. And yeah, let's change this to your data will be safe with us. This has to be enter your height in centimeters. And yeah, we need to change the type here, and you can either put text there or you could put number. Putting text in there would require that you convert that string into an integer or a float in Python when you write a Python script. However, that's not the problem there. The problem is if you input text, you cannot apply some restrictions of the input that the user will enter. So if the user wants to enter 1000 there with a text type here in the HTML, you'll not be able to check for that. But if you put a number, then you can apply some minimum attribute. So you can say don't put anything below 50 centimeters, and also don't put anything above, let's say, 300 centimeters. So that's 3 meters. You can tweak these values to whatever you want. So, and also if you want the user to also enter something like 170 centimeters 0.1, you'd want to pass the step attribute there and specify how many decimal points you want to allow the user to enter. So if you put, for instance, 0.1, you'd only allow 1 decimal point there. If you put 0.01, that will be more decimal points. However, I think it's enough accuracy to have centimeters for the height, so I'll just remove this and just restrict the user to enter whole numbers. Good. And then this would be height name. Yeah. Lastly, we want to input the button, and then we try out the form, so to see what we have this far. And that would be a button tag and the closing tag, and between these two goes the text that you want to display above the button. So submit, and then you need to pass some attributes here. So the type of the button would be submit. So this defines the role that this button has over this form. So the button will submit the entries that the user will input in these input boxes. That's basically it. That's our form, and let's see how this goes. So Ctrl R to reload it. Yeah, we have the inputs there. So don't worry if this box is smaller than this. This is an email type, so this has to be bigger, but then later we will make this the same with CSS. And so let's try something. Let's fake email address. So if you pass something like this, you'd get something like please include an @ in the email. So let's put something that looks like an email, and here you can put the range. If you put 40, you'll see that it says that the value must be greater or equal than or to 50. So let's put 200 there. Submit. Yeah, it's working. So we were sent to the success.html page because that's what we assigned to the action attribute here of the form tag. Good, this is working great. Yeah, basically that's it. This is about building the HTML part. Now in the next lecture we'll go ahead and do this CSS, so that the index.html and the success.html page will look much better than they look now. So see you in the next lecture.